In a galaxy where bravery is measured by battle scars and victory songs, one alien war hero became a legend not for his conquests, but for the tales he told, tales of humans who defied the impossible. What he revealed left even the fiercest warriors trembling. The war hero stood at the edge of the landing platform, his silhouette framed against the amber skies of his homeworld. His armor bore the scars of countless battles, deep gashes from plasma blades, scorched metal from energy blasts, and dents where enemy claws had nearly claimed his life. Yet he stood tall, his posture radiating strength and honor. The crowd gathered below erupted in thunderous applause, their voices echoing across the grand courtyard as they chanted his name. He had returned from the front lines victorious, hailed as a legend among his kind. His people celebrated him not just for his survival, but for his conquests against the fiercest adversaries the galaxy had ever known. They called him the Conqueror of Shadows, the Vanquisher of the Inferno Fleet. Songs would be written about his courage, and statues would be erected to immortalize his deeds. Yet, despite the glory that awaited him, a shadow lingered in his eyes. He descended the platform steps slowly, his heavy boots clanging against the metal with each step. He could feel the weight of their admiration, their expectations pressing down on him. They wanted stories of victory, of enemies crushed under his might, of glorious battles fought in distant star systems. They yearned for tales of triumph that would inspire the young and embolden the soldiers preparing to march into the next campaign. He was ushered into the great hall, where the council of elders awaited him. The air was thick with the scent of ceremonial incense, swirling in wisps around towering pillars adorned with the banners of his people. The elders sat on high thrones, their faces hidden beneath ornate hoods, their eyes glowing with anticipation. The hall was packed with warriors, veterans and cadets alike, all eager to hear the words of their greatest champion. He stood before them, his posture rigid, his face a mask of stoicism. Yet inside, memories churned like a violent storm. He had faced beasts with fangs like daggers, machines programmed for annihilation, and creatures whose minds bent reality itself. But none of them haunted him the way humans did. His voice was steady as he began his tale, echoing through the cavernous hall. He recounted the grand battles against monstrous invaders, his strategies that outwitted the most cunning enemies, and the alliances he forged with species thought impossible to negotiate with. The crowd was mesmerized, their eyes wide with admiration and awe. But he could feel their growing hunger. They wanted the story of his greatest foe, the enemy that had challenged him to his core. When he spoke the word humans, the hall fell silent. Some faces twisted in confusion, others in disbelief. Humans were considered insignificant primitive beings from a tiny blue planet, barely more than pests compared to the cosmic threats his people had faced. How could they possibly be the enemy that haunted his nightmares? His eyes darkened, his voice dropping to a low, grave tone. He described his first encounter with them, how they moved with a purpose that was unnervingly deliberate. They did not fight like others. They did not retreat when outnumbered. They did not surrender even when all hope was lost. Their eyes burned with a fierce light that was not born of fury or hatred, but of resolve and unyielding will that defied reason. Whispers rippled through the hall, disbelief evident on every face. How could this be? Humans were fragile, short-lived creatures. They were not made of steel or stone. They were flesh and bone, weak and breakable. Yet the hero's voice wavered as he confessed that he had never known fear until he faced them. Not fear of pain or death, but fear of the unknown, of an enemy who refused to be defeated, whose spirit could not be crushed. He looked into the eyes of the warriors before him, those who would soon march into battle against this new foe. He saw their doubt, their scorn, their unwillingness to believe. He knew they would learn the truth soon enough, just as he had. But would they survive the revelation? The hall remained silent long after his voice faded. The hero turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing behind him. The war was far from over, and the galaxy had yet to understand the terrifying power of human resolve. It was supposed to be a routine mission, an easy conquest on a desolate moon circling a gas giant at the edge of a forgotten star system. The hero and his platoon were assigned to secure an outpost, a strategic point that would serve as a gateway to more valuable targets. Intelligence reports labeled the opposition as insignificant, a small band of human soldiers, poorly equipped and isolated from reinforcements. Victory seemed assured. They descended on the barren moon with precision and efficiency, their war machines carving through the dust and rock. The atmosphere was thin, cold, and lifeless, mirroring the confidence of the invaders who believed no resistance could stand against them. Their armor gleamed under the pale light, their weapons charged with deadly energy. They moved as a single, unified force, trained to dominate any battlefield. The initial skirmishes were laughable. The humans' defenses crumbled easily, their barricades reduced to rubble in moments. The hero watched from the front lines, his gaze sharp, his stance unyielding. It was almost disappointing too easy. He had faced far more formidable enemies in his career, creatures with scales like armor and beasts whose roars shattered stone. But then, the humans regrouped. The shift was subtle at first. A break in the noise, a lull that seemed unnatural. The humans fell back, vanishing into the jagged landscape of craters and canyons. His forces pursued, confident in their superior firepower and numbers. But the terrain was treacherous, filled with shadows and narrow passageways that twisted and turned. The humans were waiting. Explosions erupted from beneath the rock, sending plumes of dust skyward. The enemy had anticipated their movements, planting traps that shattered formations and isolated squads. The hero's soldiers faltered, confusion spreading through their ranks. How could these primitives anticipate their tactics so perfectly? He barked orders, rallying his troops, pushing them forward. But the humans did not fight as expected. They did not defend a fixed position. They did not retreat in fear. They attacked with a ferocity that defied logic. They emerged from the shadows, swift and relentless, striking at vulnerable points before vanishing once more. Their movements were calculated, each attack precise, designed to inflict maximum damage with minimal exposure. The hero's forces found themselves surrounded by ghosts, foes who seemed to know every crack and crevice of the land. The humans used the terrain to their advantage, fighting with an intelligence and adaptability that bordered on supernatural. Despite their casualties, the humans never showed fear. Wounded soldiers continued to fight, dragging themselves forward, firing with withering focus. Some detonated explosives even as they were struck down, determined to take as many enemies with them as possible. Their eyes blazed with something terrifying, something that went beyond courage. It was resolve. A defiance that refused to yield even in the face of certain death. The hero watched in awe as one of his elite warriors faced off against a lone human. The human was battered, bleeding, his armor shattered. Yet he did not flee. He charged forward, a savage roar erupting from his lungs as he tackled his enemy, igniting a grenade clutch to his chest. The explosion echoed across the barren moon, leaving only ashes behind. The hero shuddered. It was not the act of sacrifice that disturbed him. It was the look in the human's eyes, a look that spoke of victory even in death. They fought as though defeat was not an option. They fought as though they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. The hero's forces, conditioned to seek survival and glory, could not understand this madness. They hesitated, their morale shaken by the humans' unwavering determination. Panic spread like wildfire, their formations crumbling under the relentless onslaught. The hero struggled to maintain order, his voice drowned out by the chaos. When the dust finally settled, the moon was littered with the bodies of his fallen warriors. The humans were gone, having melted into the shadows once more. They did not stay to celebrate victory or claim spoils. They left behind only destruction and echoes of their defiance. The hero stood amidst the wreckage, his armor scarred, his pride wounded. He had faced countless enemies across the galaxy, but never before had he encountered such unyielding willpower. These humans were not merely fighting to win, they were fighting to survive, to defy extinction. And they fought with a fury that made them more than soldiers. It made them legends. For the first time in his life, the hero felt a chill crawl down his spine. It was the cold grip of fear, not of death, but of an enemy who could not be broken. An enemy who turned hopelessness into strength. An enemy who fought not because they wanted to, but because they had to. As he looked out over the desolate battlefield, he understood that this was only the beginning. The humans were not defeated. They were merely waiting. The hero's forces regrouped, determined to crush the human resistance once and for all. They established a perimeter around the moon's rugged terrain, cutting off every escape route. Supplies were plentiful, their weaponry unmatched, and reinforcements awaited on orbiting warships. Confidence surged through the ranks. They were superior in every way, stronger, faster, and more advanced. Yet, the humans refused to break. At first, they tried traditional tactics, launching relentless assaults designed to overwhelm and exhaust. Waves of soldiers surged forward, weapons blazing, forcing the humans deeper into the labyrinth of canyons. But the humans did not tire. They fought with the same ferocity on the third day as they did on the first. Their movements were sharp, precise, never sluggish despite the grueling conditions. It was as if fatigue was a foreign concept to them. Confusion rippled through the platoons. How could such fragile creatures possess such endurance? How could they continue fighting with bodies that required rest, nourishment, and care? The hero ordered surveillance, determined to understand his enemy's secret. Drones were dispatched, silently observing from above, tracking every human movement. What they revealed was unsettling. The humans did not sleep. For days they remained vigilant, eyes sharp, hands steady on their weapons. They moved swiftly and silently through the rugged landscape, maintaining discipline even when surrounded. Occasionally they huddled together, consuming meager rations and sharing whispers of encouragement. But there was no rest, no relaxation. It was as if they thrived on sheer willpower alone. The hero's strategists dismissed it as desperation. They are on the brink of collapse, they assured him. Their bodies will betray them soon enough. But the humans defied biology. On the fifth day they launched a counteroffensive, striking hard at weak points along the perimeter. They moved with precision, exploiting gaps in patrols, disabling communications, and retreating before reinforcements could respond. It was surgical, efficient, and brutal. Frustration grew among the heroes' ranks. They were fighting an enemy who refused to falter. Psychological tactics were implemented next. Floodlights were erected, illuminating every canyon and crevice, robbing the humans of shadows to hide in. Sonic emitters blared deafening noise at irregular intervals, disrupting any attempt at rest or recovery. The air was saturated with vibrations meant to unnerve, to agitate. Yet the humans endured. Their movements remained calculated, their aim true. The hero watched surveillance feeds in disbelief as they continued to operate with military precision. Exhaustion never dulled their reflexes. Their faces were hard, expressions of grim determination etched into every line and scar. It was unnatural, almost inhuman. Desperation drove the hero to push harder. He ordered night raids, hoping to catch them in moments of weakness. But every assault met fierce resistance. The humans fought like cornered beasts, lashing out with a savagery that bordered on madness. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. Even when outnumbered, they continued to fight, their eyes burning with defiance. The hero recalled one brutal skirmish where his soldiers surrounded a human platoon, pinning them against a cliffside. There was no escape, no chance of victory. Yet, the humans stood their ground, backs to the rock, forming a defensive line. They fought with every ounce of strength, refusing to yield even as their numbers dwindled. Not one attempted to flee. Not one dropped their weapon. They fought until the last breath. It was then that the hero understood. It was not that humans did not need sleep. It was that they refused to succumb to it. Their bodies were exhausted, their muscles trembling with fatigue, but their minds remained unbroken. They fought with a resolve that transcended physical limitations. It was a battle of willpower, and theirs was unyielding. His soldiers began to whisper of the sleepless enemy, spreading tales of humans who could not be broken, who fought on even as their bodies failed. Fear crept into the ranks, uncertainty clouding their resolve. How could they defeat an enemy who defied nature itself? How could they hope to break spirits that seemed indomitable? The hero's confidence wavered. He had faced giants who crushed war machines with their bare hands, beings who bent time and space to their will. But this was different. This was not power. It was perseverance beyond reason. It was determination that defied all logic. Standing on the edge of the canyon, the hero watched the shadows shift, knowing the humans were out there, waiting. They would attack again, without warning, without rest. They would come, not because they could win, but because they refused to lose. He clenched his fists, a chill crawling down his spine. The humans were not fighting for victory. They were fighting because surrender was not in their nature. He realized then that he was not facing soldiers. He was facing legends. The hero prided himself on his strategic brilliance. He had outmaneuvered cunning foes, predicted the tactics of warlords, and countered the most complex battle plans. Yet, these humans defied all logic. They fought without pattern or predictability, as if they were guided by chaos itself. His forces could not anticipate their moves, could not corner them. It was like fighting shadows. He studied every recorded battle, analyzing movements and formations. But the humans followed no traditional doctrine. They attacked from impossible angles, exploited the smallest weaknesses, and vanished before counterattacks could be launched. They seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, appearing out of thin air and striking with surgical precision. It was as if they knew his plans before he did. To counter this, the hero deployed scouts and spies, spreading a network of informants and sensors across the battlefield. Yet, the humans slipped through undetected, leaving no trace. His scouts reported shadows where no being stood, whispers carried by the wind, and footprints that led to dead ends. It was as if the land itself conspired to hide them. Their cunning was unmatched. They used the environment with mastery, turning craters into ambush points, transforming caves into traps, and blending seamlessly with the rugged landscape. They made no noise, left no scent, and their energy signatures were masked by the planet's natural radiation. His soldiers called them phantoms, ghosts who could not be hunted. The humans' tactics were not merely defensive. They struck with purpose, dismantling his logistics with brutal efficiency. Supply lines were severed in the dead of night. Communication towers collapsed without warning, and ammunition depots exploded in fireballs that lit the desolate sky. His forces were isolated, confused, their morale crumbling under the constant threat of unseen enemies. The hero was furious. These were not warriors, they were predators hunting with patience and precision. They did not engage in open combat unless victory was certain. Instead, they wore down his forces, attacking from the shadows and melting away before retaliation. It was not warfare, it was survival at its most primal form. To counter their stealth, he deployed advanced surveillance drones equipped with thermal imaging and motion sensors. The skies buzzed with machines programmed to detect the slightest disturbance, but the humans adapted. They used decoys, setting off false alarms and leading patrols into carefully laid traps. They even scavenged fallen drones, repurposing the technology against its creators. The hero's strategies began to unravel. Every time he thought he had them cornered, they outmaneuvered him. They anticipated his ambushes, bypassed his defenses, and turned his own traps against him. It was as if they were inside his mind, predicting his every move. His frustration grew, his confidence shaken. No matter what he did, the humans were always one step ahead. He began to hear rumors among his soldiers, whispers of humans who could read thoughts, who were invisible to the eye. Superstition spread like wildfire, fear infecting even his most loyal warriors. The hero silenced the rumors with harsh discipline, but he could not deny the truth. The humans were unlike any enemy he had faced. They were strategists of the highest order, cunning and adaptive. They fought without rules, without honor, and without mercy. One night, he ordered a full-scale assault on a suspected human hideout. His forces surrounded the location, advancing with overwhelming firepower. But when they breached the defenses, they found only empty tunnels and abandoned equipment. The humans had been there, but they were already gone, leaving behind booby traps that tore through his ranks. In that instant, the hero realized they were not fighting to win, they were fighting to survive. And in survival, there were no rules, no limits. The humans used deception as a weapon, turning the hero's strength into weakness. They fought with the cunning of prey that had learned to hunt its predators. The final blow came when his command center was attacked from within. Humans had infiltrated his ranks, wearing the armor of fallen soldiers, mimicking their mannerisms and voices. They had walked among his forces, gathering intelligence, feeding him false information. His defenses crumbled from the inside, his strategies unraveled by his own ignorance. The humans had outsmarted him completely. In that moment of defeat, the hero understood the terrifying truth. Humans were not bound by pride or tradition. They fought without ego, embracing deception and misdirection. They were masters of psychological warfare, manipulating perceptions and sowing confusion. They were not merely soldiers, they were predators who understood that victory was not about strength, but about control. The hero stood amidst the ruins of his command center, his pride shattered, his forces scattered. He could feel their eyes on him, watching from the shadows, waiting for the next move. They were not ghosts, they were hunters, and he was their prey. For the first time, the hero felt truly vulnerable. He had underestimated them, mistaking their lack of honor for weakness. But the humans fought for survival, and in survival, there was no room for honor. There was only victory or death. As the winds howled through the empty canyons, he realized that his greatest enemy was not their strength or their weapons, but their minds, unpredictable, relentless, and terrifyingly intelligent. They were not just warriors, they were strategists, and they had turned his battlefield into their hunting ground. The hero's armies were weary, their morale shattered by an enemy that defied all logic. The humans were fewer in number, weaker in stature, and technologically inferior, yet they would not break. They fought with a defiance that bordered on madness, driven by a willpower that could not be explained. No matter how many fell, more would rise to take their place, their eyes blazing with the same indomitable fire. The hero could not understand it. He had crushed countless civilizations, witnessed entire species surrender to his might. Yet these humans stood firm, refusing to yield even when surrounded, outgunned, and hopelessly outmatched. It was not courage, it was something deeper, something primal. They fought not just to win, but to deny defeat itself. Desperate for answers, he studied their history, delving into the records of Earth's past. What he found was both astonishing and terrifying. These creatures were survivors, shaped by a world of chaos and conflict. They had fought each other for millennia, endured cataclysms, famine, and disease. Their history was one of struggle and endurance, of rising from ashes over and over again. Defeat was not in their nature because they had faced extinction countless times and had always refused to die. This spirit was evident on the battlefield. Even when surrounded, even when hope was gone, the humans continued to fight. They did not surrender. They did not beg for mercy. Instead, they stood their ground, fighting with a fury that defied all reason. Their eyes burned with defiance, their faces set in grim determination. It was as if their very existence depended on refusing to give in. The hero remembered a battle in the northern canyons, where his forces encircled a group of human soldiers, cutting off all escape routes. Outnumbered and outgunned, the humans were given a chance to surrender, but instead they charged forward, roaring in unison, attacking with a savagery that stunned even the most seasoned warriors. They fought until the last man fell, their blood staining the rocks, their spirits unbroken even in death. His soldiers were shaken, haunted by the memory of those burning eyes. They spoke in whispers, calling the humans demons, spirits who could not be vanquished. The hero silenced the rumors, but he could not shake the image from his mind. How could they fight with such fury, with such desperation? What could drive beings to embrace death rather than admit defeat? He sought prisoners, hoping to understand the source of this unbreakable spirit. But even in captivity, the humans defied him. They stared through the bars with defiance, refusing to bow, refusing to speak. Some even laughed, mocking their captors, their eyes filled with contempt. It was not bravado. It was belief in something greater than themselves. The hero's interrogators reported no fear, no hesitation. Even under the harshest conditions, the humans remained steadfast. They spat curses, sang songs of defiance, and shared stories of their fallen comrades. They did not break. Their spirits remained intact, unyielding to pain or despair. It was as if they were fighting not just for survival, but for something sacred. Then he found it the key to their resolve. In a captured datapad, he discovered messages sent between soldiers, words of hope and love. They spoke of families waiting on distant worlds, of children they would die to protect, of homes they would fight to defend. They fought not for glory, but for each other, for those they loved, for the future they believed in. It was then that the hero understood. These humans were not fighting for conquest or power. They were fighting for survival, for freedom, for the right to exist. They were fighting for hope. And hope, he realized, was a weapon more powerful than any he had ever faced. The hero's armies grew hesitant, their resolve weakened by the humans' unyielding defiance. How could they fight an enemy who would rather die than submit? How could they conquer those who fought not for victory, but for the right to live on their own terms? His soldiers faltered, haunted by the memory of those eyes burning with hope, with determination, with the fire of freedom. The hero himself began to doubt. He had faced giants and gods, crushed civilizations beneath his heel. But he had never faced hope. He had never faced a spirit that refused to break, a will that would not bend. These humans were not invincible, but they were unbreakable. And that made them the most dangerous enemy he had ever encountered. Standing on the edge of a ruined battlefield, surrounded by the echoes of battle cries and the ashes of fallen warriors, the hero looked out over the rugged landscape. He could feel their presence, could sense their defiance even in the silence. They were waiting, watching, ready to fight again. He understood then that this war could not be won through strength or strategy. It could not be won by crushing their bodies or shattering their defenses. To defeat them, he would have to break their spirits. But how could he break hope? How could he conquer those who had nothing to lose, yet everything to fight for? As the sun sank beneath the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate land, the hero realized the terrible truth. He was not just fighting humans. He was fighting the very essence of survival itself. And survival, he knew, was the most powerful force in the universe. The war dragged on, longer than the hero could have ever anticipated. His forces were exhausted, their morale shattered by an enemy that refused to be defeated. The humans fought with a tenacity that defied reason, an endurance that bordered on the supernatural. Rumors spread through his ranks, whispers of beings who could not be killed, who rose from the ashes to fight again and again. They were no longer seen as mere soldiers. They were legends. It started with stories from the front lines. Soldiers spoke of a human who faced an entire platoon alone, buying time for his comrades to escape. He fought with unimaginable ferocity, his body riddled with wounds, yet he never fell. When his weapon ran dry, he fought with his hands, roaring in defiance. They said his spirit lingered even after his body was torn apart, his voice echoing across the battlefield, urging others to rise. Another tale spoke of a woman who defied death itself. She was seen leading charges, her eyes blazing with fury, her presence inspiring those around her. She was struck down, only to appear again days later, leading another assault with the same fire, the same relentless determination. It was as if death could not claim her, as if her will to fight transcended mortality. The hero dismissed these stories as exaggerations, desperate fantasies born from fear and fatigue. Yet the reports persisted. His most trusted commander spoke of shadows that moved against the wind, of voices carried by the dust, whispering defiance. Patrols were ambushed by enemies they swore were dead, outposts raided by figures who vanished like smoke. His soldiers began to dread the night, haunted by the belief that the humans were not bound by life or death. He deployed scouts to investigate, to debunk the myths and restore order. But the scouts returned shaken, their faces pale, their voices trembling. They spoke of human graves disturbed, of footprints leading away from burial sites. They found symbols carved into the rocks, marks of remembrance left by the humans for their fallen. It was a ritual, a way of honoring the dead. Yet his soldiers interpreted it as something darker, a summoning, a resurrection. Fear gripped his forces. How could they fight an enemy that did not die? How could they defeat beings who rose from the grave to continue the battle? Desperation led to superstition. They began to believe that the humans were spirits of vengeance, warriors bound by honor and duty, whose hatred for their conquerors kept them fighting beyond death. The hero's control over his armies began to waver. His soldiers hesitated, their movements sluggish, their eyes haunted by visions of the fallen who refused to stay down. They feared the land itself, seeing ghosts in every shadow, hearing battle cries in the wind. It was madness, yet the hero could not dismiss it, for he too felt their presence. He too heard the whispers. He sought answers, searching the archives for knowledge of these creatures. What he found was terrifying. Humanity's history was filled with legends of heroes who defied death, who stood against impossible odds and emerged victorious. They were survivors, warriors who fought not just for themselves, but for those who would come after them. Their strength was born from sacrifice, their endurance from love and loyalty. They were driven by duty, by honor, by hope. The humans believed that as long as they were remembered, they could never truly die. They fought for a legacy, for a future beyond their own lives. It was why they stood their ground, why they charged into battle without fear. Even in death, they continued to fight through the stories they inspired, through the courage they ignited in others. They became legends, symbols of defiance and perseverance. The hero realized that he was not just fighting soldiers. He was fighting an idea, a belief that transcended flesh and bone. It was a legacy of resistance, a history of survival. The humans had faced extinction before, and they had always risen from the ashes. They did not fear death, because death could not silence them. Their stories lived on, their legends growing with each sacrifice. His armies were crumbling, their resolve shattered by ghosts they could not kill. For how could they defeat memories? How could they conquer spirits born of hope? Every fallen human became a martyr, a symbol of resistance. Every victory turned to dust as the legend of humanity grew stronger. The hero stood atop a barren hill, overlooking the battlefield strewn with the wreckage of his once mighty army. He could feel the humans watching from the shadows, their presence heavy, their spirits unbroken. They were waiting, not for victory, but for him to realize the truth. They had already won. Not through strength or strategy, but through belief. They had become more than warriors, they had become legends. And legends could not be killed, they could only be remembered. For the first time, the hero understood the depth of his defeat. He had not merely lost a war. He had created immortals, transformed his enemies into symbols of defiance that would inspire generations. He had forged the legend of humanity, and that legend would live on long after his empire crumbled. As the wind howled across the desolate plains, carrying the echoes of battle cries and whispered names, the hero bowed his head. He was not defeated by strength or strategy. He was defeated by hope, by a spirit that could not be conquered, by a people who would not surrender, by legends who would never die. The hero stood amidst the ruins of his once mighty empire, the echoes of battle fading into a haunting silence. His armies were shattered, his fleets reduced to smoldering wreckage scattered across the stars. What was meant to be a swift conquest had turned into a nightmare of attrition, his forces ground down by an enemy that refused to break. The humans had stood firm, defiant to the end, their spirit unyielding even in death. He walked through the desolate remains of his command center, past walls scorched by explosions and floors stained with the blood of his soldiers. The air was heavy with smoke and dust, the remnants of his ambition crumbling around him. He had believed himself invincible, a conqueror of worlds. Yet he had been defeated by creatures who were supposed to be inferior, fragile beings who defied the natural order. His thoughts were plagued by visions of those burning eyes, faces etched with defiance and determination. They had fought with a fury that defied reason, charging into hopeless battles with unwavering resolve. Even when victory was impossible, they stood their ground, fighting not for survival, but for something greater, an idea, a belief, a legacy. He had faced warriors, survivors, legends, but most terrifying of all, he had faced hope. As the last of his warships retreated, limping away from the broken world that had resisted them, he remembered the final message broadcast by the human resistance. It was not a plea for mercy or a declaration of victory. It was a promise, a vow that humanity would endure, that their spirit would never be conquered. They spoke of freedom, of hope, of a future they would fight to protect. It was not a threat, it was destiny. He realized then that they had never fought to win. They had fought to be remembered. Every fallen soldier became a symbol, every battle a story of defiance. They turned defeats into legends, transforming their losses into seeds of resistance. They did not fear death, for they understood that death was not the end. Their stories would live on, carried by those who survived, inspiring others to rise and continue the fight. The hero felt the weight of his failure, not just as a commander, but as a conqueror. He had underestimated them, mistaking their hope for weakness, their defiance for desperation. But hope was their greatest weapon, a force that could not be destroyed by any army or strategy. It was an idea, and ideas were immortal. They could not be killed, only silenced, and even then, only for a moment. He looked up at the night sky, now devoid of his warships, and saw the stars shining with cold, distant light. Among them, he imagined the survivors fleeing to new worlds, carrying the memory of those who had fallen, the legends of heroes who stood against impossible odds. They would rebuild, grow stronger, and one day they would return. Not as enemies, but as conquerors of their own destiny. He had thought himself a god, a master of fate, but he was only a conqueror of flesh and bone. The humans had conquered time itself, ensuring their legacy would live on, echoing through history long after his empire turned to dust. Their defiance would inspire generations, a reminder that hope could not be extinguished, that freedom could not be chained. The hero felt a chill run through him, a realization that he was not witnessing an end, but a beginning. The legend of humanity would grow, whispered among the stars, passed down through stories and songs. They would be remembered as warriors, survivors, heroes who fought not just for victory, but for the right to exist. Their defiance would echo through eternity, a challenge to all who sought to oppress. He knew that his name would be forgotten, buried beneath the ruins of his ambition, but theirs would live on, etched into the very fabric of the universe. He had tried to conquer them, but they had conquered fear, conquered death itself. They were more than just soldiers. They were hope incarnate, a force that could not be chained, could not be silenced. As the wind swept through the desolate battlefield, carrying the whispers of fallen warriors and the echoes of defiance, the hero understood his true defeat. It was not his armies that were destroyed, but his legacy, his dream of eternal dominion shattered by a people who refused to be forgotten. Humanity had become legend, and legends could never die. They would rise, again and again, reborn through memory and hope. Their story would inspire the oppressed, giving courage to the weak, defying tyranny with the promise of freedom. They were the embodiment of survival, of defiance, of the will to live. And they would be remembered. Long after his empire crumbled, long after the stars themselves faded, their legend would remain. An echo of defiance, a whisper of hope. The promise of freedom that could never be conquered. The story of humanity, the unbreakable, the undying. The legend that would live forever.